Welcome to The Bold New Normal, the podcast where bold ideas meet transformative action. I'm your host, Lucy Quist, and I'm here to challenge mindsets, ignite conversations, and inspire you to create the future you deserve. A future where equity, opportunity, and prosperity are not just dreams but realities. So let's dive in and build the bold new normal together. When I was a little girl, I was very fortunate to do a lot of work at home with my dad. I mean, schoolwork, study work. And I know it doesn't always happen for everyone, but I thought I was very fortunate. And my dad loved his math and science, in fact, more math than anything. But interestingly, he was also very keen for me to read. And he would tell me about how he thought I could write. But it was always in passing, because when you're doing math, you're not thinking about writing. And then I remember being about 8 years old. And of course, growing up, I'd read many books, many children's books. But I remember being about 8 years old and my dad buying me what I will call my first really serious book. It was a biography of Shehu Shagari, our first president of Nigeria. And I remember being that young and him telling me something about how I would write or be written about, something along those lines. But invariably, what he was doing was transmitting his dream for me, or one of his dreams for me, to me. Today, we're talking about living the bold new normal. And in the context of the bold new normal, dreams are extremely important. So what happened with that dream that my dad gave me, amongst many other dreams? Well, first of all, as an 8-year-old, I didn't actually read the book he gave me. I have subsequently been through it, but as an 8-year-old, the text was way too heavy. He gave it to me more for the inspiration of a dream rather than the idea that an 8-year-old would really understand a book that not only talks about a president, but it talks about his country's journey in the context of the president's journey. So of course, when I'm 8 years old, I don't understand any of that. But I still have it to this day, decades later, and my dad having passed away, I still have the book he gave me, amongst many other things. Several years later, I would say at least over almost 3 decades later, maybe 2.5, I remember writing in my notebooks. I always write in notebooks, dreams that I have, things I want to do. And that idea came back to me and I wrote in my book, this was in 2009, about 2009, I wrote in my book that I wrote a number of things I wanted to achieve. And one of the things I wrote down was, I'd love to write a book. So in some ways, that dream was finding its way to becoming more of a vision, right? Because visions, when you write down, I'd like to write a book, what you're really saying from a vision point of view is that you want to become an author, because our visions are really about seeing ourselves in the activity, in the moment. So it had gone from what my father had said to me actually writing down a note that said I wanted to write a book. But I didn't put a timeline on it. And it was amongst a list of several other things that I wrote down. And I kind of wrote it and sort of left it. And then 9 years later, so much had happened in my life. I was out of where I had left where I was working at Airtel. This was in the beginning of 2018, 9 years later. And I took out a flip chart and I wrote down all of the things I thought I wanted to get done. Back to the idea of writing things down. And of course, there were career things and family things and so on. But in that time, I wrote down the fact that I wanted to write a book. Now, the preamble to this was that in the preceding 3.5 years, I had been writing short pieces on social media, but really instigated by the fact that people had asked me to mentor them and speak to them. And I didn't have enough capacity to engage all of the people that I would have liked to engage. So writing on social media and writing speeches for talks that I was giving was my way of engaging and mentoring and spending time with a large number of people. So that was the preamble to that. But in January 2018, I wrote down this note. So we've gone from dream, we've gone from writing it as a hope to writing it down as a specific activity in a given year. And then from that point onwards, I proceeded to say, well, what's the plan? because nothing about my journey so far lent itself to the idea that I could actually be an author. Writing pieces and being an author are not the same thing. And if, like me, you studied science, math, engineering, there's this notion that people think that engineers are not great communicators or they can't write. People always try to box you in and tell you what you're capable of doing based on what they know about you, your history, your background, your chosen profession. But we are so many things much more than the thing that's in front of us that maybe we chose to do right when we were 18 years old and we're still we can't only be that thing. Anyway, I decided, slightly with a tinge of naivety, considering that I hadn't written a book before, that I should be done in 3 to 6 months max. So that now the plan was in 3 to 6 months, by the middle of 2018, my book would be done. The next question I had to answer for myself was, well, how do you write a book? And I took a very engineering-led approach, which was creating a structure, creating chapters, organizing what I knew already, and then writing it out. So very iteratively. It took longer than 6 months. The book was actually published in April of 2019, but it got done. The Bold New Normal was published. And so I'd gone from Daddy giving a dream, Lucy having a dream, Lucy writing a vision, Lucy creating a plan, to Lucy actually publishing a book, all the while dealing with the notion that engineers don't write. So how do you live the bold new normal? Because that's what we're here to talk about properly today. Living the bold new normal. Living the bold new normal is about having dreams as a starting point. And I'm almost willing to bet that every single one of you listening to me today or watching has a dream. At least one. Hopefully many. I have many. But you have at least one dream. And living the bold new normal starts from having a dream. But dreams are not enough, because dreams tend to be lofty and idealistic and not always centered in what is real. And now don't get me wrong, dreams shouldn't be limited by what is real. But we need dreams that are attainable. So you take a dream and you translate it into a vision. It has to be, what does it look like to live in this dream? What does it look like to be in this dream? What does it look like to experience this dream as my lived experience? That's the vision. Vision is something you can visualize yourself experiencing. And then the vision has to be translated into a plan. My great idea to write a book and be an author needed a plan, needed a structure, needed dedicated time and execution. And then our plans need action. But here's where the sticking point is. Way too often, the first thing you hear from yourself, not even from others, is how that vision is not attainable, or it's attainable, but you keep telling yourself words or using language, as I call it, that is counter to your dream. So imagine I wrote down I wanted to write a book, but kept telling myself, oh, but engineers don't write. But Lucy, you've never written a book before. But Lucy, actually the thing I did do when I had doubts was write to one or two authors and ask for their input and ask them to look at what I was doing. It's better to reinforce yourself by addressing what could become negative language counter to your dream by solving it than living in that negativity. Now, if you can switch from the negative self-talk and conversation that is counter to your dream to rather, how do I solve for that? Then guess what happens? You start to believe that it's possible, and your mindset about yourself and about that dream and vision start changing. The bold new normal is about shifting mindsets. It is our mindset that allows us to prosper, because everything else is driven off our mindset. And that mindset that is aligned to the vision starts to accelerate our execution, our activities. Yes, I got to 6 months in and I hadn't finished the book, but I didn't stop, because now I knew that it was really possible, because I'd seen the activity, I'd seen the action, and I'd seen I was making progress. So maybe it wasn't going to be 6 months, and maybe new things were going to keep happening, but I was going to keep pushing through. I had a publisher I had managed to get hold of him. I had him in my ear. So you create for yourself, based on your mindset and belief, all the activities activities and touch points that drive execution. And guess what? The more I got done and the more you get done aligned to your vision, the more you will do because you feel reinforced, you feel empowered, you keep pushing and digging and chipping away till you get to your goal. Living the bold new normal, dreams and visions, plans and execution, mindset shifts, reinforcement, very, very, very importantly, wrapped around all of this is the fact that I took action. You must take action. I took action so that 8-year-old girl will become an author. You can take action to become all of the things that you have in your dreams that you translate into visions. But none of it will happen if you do nothing. So today I encourage you, wherever you find yourself on that journey, whatever you think has happened in the past, whatever you've been told or you've told yourself, I want you to take these ideas. I want you to reflect on how you can shape your daily activities around these ideas to take action and by extension, create your prosperity in whatever field of activity that you choose to prioritize as you live your bold new normal. Let's do this. Thank you for tuning in to The Bold New Normal. I hope this episode has inspired you to think boldly and take action towards creating the future you envision. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs a dose of boldness today. Until next time, take action to create your bold new normal.